Hello, welcome to When the Smoke Clears. I am the Recovery Plug. What's happening, man? I hope you guys are doing great today. I know my day's going just fine. Man, so what's up? Another day, man. Another day. Another day in sobriety, another day in recovery, another great day to be alive. Yes, it is. So what's up? Check this out, man. If you would please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer for the addict who still suffers, and for those of you who are still bound down to some sort of struggle that keeps you, from going forward in this toxic life that we live in, man. So yeah, please, a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. Yes, it is. All right, well, check this out, man. Now that we got that out of the way, today's subject. Let's dig in, man. Check this out. In my journey, in my life, in my journey of recovery, positivity, spirituality, all of that stuff. I mentioned it before. I practice a lot of things. You know what I mean? I indulge in a little bit of this and a little bit of that. What I mean by that is I take in concepts that help people move forward in their spiritual connection with the divinity, with the divine matrix, with that spiritual connection with that energy, with God, with the divine matrix, with whatever it is that you want to call that energy force. You know what I mean? And for me, the way I do that is I indulge in different things. You know what I mean? Different cultures, different religions, different spiritual practices. And so one of the things that I did yesterday was I went to a Dharma recovery meeting. Basically it's the Buddhist tradition and that sort of thing, and it's surrounded. It's a recovery based on that practice, right? And which is great. You know what I mean? I believe that every religion, every faith-based community has something to offer. I believe that they're all good in one way, shape, or form or another. And as I'm sitting there, listening, I love listening to stories. And one of the things that I do when I go to different meetings and listen into different communities and what they got to say is I listen to things that help. I listen to the pain. I listen to the adversity. I listen to how people are adapting to their struggles, to their life, and how that goes. And yesterday, as I was there sharing a story, when you go to these meetings and these gatherings and stuff like that, when someone shares, whoever shares first usually kind of sets the tone of how the stories start unraveling, because now that's the beauty of it, is that you get to open up that can, if you will, for people who don't necessarily like to share, who don't necessarily feel comfortable and vulnerable sharing their story or sharing whatever is bothering them at that particular time. And so the meeting set a beautiful boundary, if you will, of comfort for people to share that experience. You know what I mean? And after I shared yesterday, a few people shared after I did, and the rest of the stories that were shared had to do with triggers, had to do with I slipped up. If something happened, I slipped up, right? And the trigger, something triggered me to use again. And I got to thinking, I was like, man, you know what? I said, I need a, it's been a little while, I guess, since I've talked about triggers on in one of my videos, and I figured, I said, you know what, I want to discuss that and see where we go with it, and because for me, triggers is an everyday thing. You know what I mean? Triggers is something that it's a constant thing that you have to be aware of. I mean, it's just the way it is, because we have a disease. Anybody and everybody who has an addiction of whatever it is, you have a disease that is incurable in a sense, and it never goes away. You know what I mean? It never goes away, so it can be tamed, and you can live a normal and productive life and be happy and that sort of thing, and live your life without that addiction, whatever that may be. And so what I'm saying here is that the disease is dormant. You know what I mean? The disease is always going to be there. The disease is not going away, and that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? How you deal with that disease is a different story. That is something that I believe you have control over. You know what I mean? I believe that there are things that are put out there, that what I call tools that you can put into your recovery arsenal to maintain and tame that. You know what I mean? And from what I heard in the stories yesterday was that, people were having a hard time. People were having a hard time because of of being hard on themselves and being isolated, or just thinking that you did this bad thing, or the distractions of your disease seem to have precedence over how you're living. You know what I mean? In other words, it's dictating your mental thought process, right? And so when I hear these stories, I feel compassion, man. I feel empathy, and I want to help. You know what I mean? But in meetings like that, in gatherings like that, you're not there to help. You're there to help yourself in letting go of whatever's bothering you. In turn, you're helping somebody else. You know what I mean? That's where that means that you're accepting your suffering for what it is, and you're compassionate enough and being vulnerable in sharing that experience so that it may help somebody else. I guess, does that make sense to anybody? And that's the only way that I could explain it. That's what's coming to my mind right now. And the way I've thought about it, because it kind of weighed heavy on me, and I said, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather some information of my own experiences and put that in the video and share it with somebody who may be watching the video, who's been struggling with the triggers, who's struggling with, man, I'm picking up, or I want to pick up, or I want to use, or I want to eat, or I don't want to eat, or I want to throw up, or I want to, whatever it is that you're addicted to, or whatever it is that you're having trouble with, right? And one of the things that I wrote down a few things, right? And I'm going to share those with you guys. And I wrote down here that one of the things that you can do to deal with the triggers is having some accountability, and that make it difficult to use. In other words, when you have accountability, you're setting up some sort of boundary for yourself, in a sense, like, you know, it could be anything as telling somebody to test you, you know, to do urine test on you, you know what I mean? Or to have, you know, say that, you know, make it a point to do something that you're accountable. Say, okay, well, at this time, I'm going to go to a meeting. At this time, I'm going to call somebody. At this time, I'm going to do this. Or when the trigger, or when I have that thought, I'm going to, you know, do something that's gonna that's gonna make you accountable for that thought process, right? So that you can change that. And it's another thing you can do is remove yourself from high risk situations. You know what I mean? And that I know that. In my experience, not removing yourself from the things that people, places, and things was a big problem. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, you are a product of your environment. You know what I mean? That basically is what that is. And so let me go on to say the third thing that I wrote down is to redirect your attention. Don't allow your mind to stay stagnant in your thoughts. And what I like to do about that is I like to do what I like to call, it's like an awareness of a mental meditative awareness, in a sense that I'm not sitting there just in silence meditating. I'm meditating as I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing. And if that thought comes into my head, I redirect my thinking into something that is of a positive and spiritual nature. You know what I mean? So that for me, that works. And so the next thing that I wrote down is you can call someone, like a friend that doesn't use, or a spiritual someone in your spiritual community, or maybe you have a sponsor, you know, or someone that you know. Who is involved in an NA or AA or peer support groups, anything like that. You know, call somebody like that will be more than happy to help out, more than happy to stay on the phone with you for a while and redirect that thought process, right? And another thing you can do is wait it out. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times, you know, it's somewhere scientifically proven, they did tests or whatever, and it says that the craving normally lasts anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes, something like that. So if you can redirect your mental thought process in waiting it out, then normally that craving will go away. You know what I mean? And you can substitute, you know, that wait time with something else. You know what I mean? A lot of times what I do is one of the things that I do is I read. You know what I mean? So if I get that trigger and that thing and it's just stagnant in my mind that I want to do this, I want to do that, you know what I mean, I want to go use or whatever it is, then I pick up a book, or I'll start listening to some encouraging podcast, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, so long that it's positive and spiritual. And because that has a lot to do with it too. You know, you don't want to pick up a something that's going to, you know, like that trigger more, like reading a book of, you know, party or whatever. You know what I mean? Whatever whatever it is that you did in your addictive mode, you want to steer clear of that sort of subject line, right? And so doing spiritual and positive, encouraging videos, podcasts, books is a good way to revert that thought process, and that wait time will pretty much diminish pretty rapidly. And so in my experience, that has been the case. And you know, because 5-10 minutes is not a long time, and you know, if you do something like that, you know, watch a spiritual podcast or an encouraging, you know, podcast of something, or read a book like this book here that I'm currently reading. You know, I open up the pages and I start reading, man. And you know, just reading 2-3 pages can eat up 5-10 minutes easily. You know what I mean? And now the craving's gone, and it's something that you conquered. You know what I mean? And another thing is that when you finish this thought process of the trigger, and now that you're not triggered anymore, a good thing to do is to write it down. Journal it down. Journal it down. Journal down what you did, how long it took for you to do that, and congratulate yourself in that journal. Congratulations, you know, whoever, you know, I always put congratulations, Joel, that you defeated another craving, and you defeated it by, you know, reading this book, entitled the book or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's a good way, you know, to have in, again, like what I call my recovery arsenal. That's another thing in my recovery arsenal that I could pick up. It's a journal, a trigger journal. You know what I mean? And I say, okay, well, this is what I did, and it worked. And I read here, and I saw this video, and I did this, and I did that, and it worked. You know what I mean? So then you can use it again, repeatedly. And then if you're at a peer support group or a meeting, and you hear somebody's story and they're struggling with that, then you got something that you can share. You know what I mean? You got a nugget that you can pass on to somebody else that can help them. Say, hey man, check this out, dude. I have a lot of triggers, man, to check this out. I got what I call a recovery journal, a trigger journal, and this is how it is. And let me just read you some of the things that I do, and you could share that. You know what I mean? If you're you know, in that phase of your recovery where you're comfortable sharing those things, then that's a good thing to share with somebody who may be struggling. Because I know one of the people that was sharing, saying, man, I feel bad because I slipped, but now I want to get in this isolated mode. And you know, for anybody who knows anything about recovering addiction, isolation mode is a no-no, right? And if you're getting to that point, man, I encourage you, pick up a book. I encourage you, listen to a podcast. I encourage you to make a journal. All of those things are helpful, and they help, and they pass the time. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, that's what you want to do. And you know, for the triggers, man, you know, I always go back to saying this, is that a lot of times you're going to have to change people, places, and things, man. It's very important. You know what I mean? I myself, you know, had to change people, places, and things in my life. And you know what? That is, it helped. You don't know how tremendously it helped me in my journey, because had I stayed in that world, had I stayed doing the things that I was doing, living the way I was living, and think that I was going to be able to live that way without using, man, I was just fooling myself. You know what I mean? And I did for many years. You know what I mean? Because when I relapsed, my relapse lasted 5 years, you know, after having a 10-year stint of sobriety. It lasted for 5 years. It was terrible, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's imperative that you know that you're going to have to do a little bit of work. You know what I mean? Even for the triggers. You know what I mean? If you have a few days of sobriety, that's great, man. I'm proud of you. I really am. And just know that if you continue to do things on a repetitive basis, man, and do little things like that, keep positive and encouraging things in your life, and when you start writing down the negative aspects of your life and changing them with positive ones and be aware of that, it's a good start. You know what I mean? It's a good start, and congratulate yourself. You know what I mean? It's okay to do that. You know what I mean? It's okay to pat yourself in the back. Say, hey man, you got another day, dude? Heck yeah, you know what I mean? Congratulations. Way to go. You know what I mean? Today's a different day. So if you do what you did yesterday, today, guess what? You can have another day sober. You know what I mean? But it always takes work. Remember that. Remember this. The guy, man, this guy, his name's Greg, man, and I don't really know him personally, but I've seen him at a lot of meetings and heard him, sharing stories. And one of the things that he shares, man, is if you do nothing, then guess what? Nothing happens. And how true is that? You know what I mean? So just remember, dude, and for anybody and everyone out there who's listening to this video, remember, if you do nothing, nothing's gonna happen. But all you got to do is do just a little bit every day and continue to do that, man. And I guarantee you it'll start snowballing and affecting, and next thing you know, man, you start replacing a bunch of those negative things with positive and spiritual things, and your life will start to transform. I guarantee you that. But anyway, yeah, so I wanted to just, bring up the topic of triggers, and hopefully that, some of the things that I mentioned help somebody. That's the whole purpose of doing this, my video podcast, is to help people, man. And it just bothered me, the fact that there was, quite a few people yesterday at that meeting that were struggling, you know what I mean? And it's an everyday thing. You know what I mean? And for me, I'm grateful that the triggers haven't been like they were in the beginning. You know what I mean? In the beginning, man, the triggers were terrible. And everything I thought about was just, gosh, I need to go use it. And I'm grateful that today my mind and my thought process is on a whole different level. And I'm so grateful to that divine energy, man, that I'm able to stay connected. You know what I mean? When you stay connected to that divine energy, man, a lot of things, good happen for you. You know what I mean? Divine matrix don't allow anything negative. It's not about that. You know what I mean? It only speaks a language of positivity and spirituality, man. You know what I mean? So it's a language that's all that it knows. And if you speak to it in that form, the reciprocation of good things happening to you in your life is very, very, very high. So but again, thank you for tuning into this video today, and talking about triggers, and just know that you're not alone. You're not alone, and if you're new, congratulations, man. Congratulations on that strive, on that first step. And if you've been here for a minute, congratulations to you too, that you got another day. And if you're one of those who've relapsed, you know what? It's okay. It's okay, because today is a new day. Today is your first day to that road of staying, on that positive and spiritual note. You know what I mean? So it's a beautiful thing, and just know that practice some of those things that I talked about, and see how it works for you. You know what I mean? And get engaged, man. Get engaged into a community of people who are trying to do the same thing that you're trying to do. You know what I mean? It's imperative that you do that, because isolation, my friends, and staying out of the loop can very, 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 quickly put you back in that loop of misery. You know what I mean? So it's imperative that you do things on a repetitive basis. Keep it spiritual, keep it positive, and keep it in the gathering of that community. You know what I mean? It's always good. So I guess that's going to be it for today's episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd please shoot me a thumbs up, comment, hit the bells, hit the subscribe button. I greatly appreciate that. And just know that when you do hit that subscribe button, it don't cost you a thing, but it will help out another veteran, help out another person dealing with PTSDs, childhood traumatic experiences, depression, anger issues, sadness, alcoholism, drug addiction, my friends, because I have dealt with all of those things at one point in time in my life. And guess what? I know a way out. And that way out may be your way out. So tune in to the next time on When the Smoke Clears. I am the Recovery Plug.